In, I guess, about 5 minutes, we will welcome Colin Roy-Ehri, Denodo Data Virtualization System. Thanks.
I'm Colin Roy-Ehri, and I'm here to talk a little bit about data virtualization, a software called Denodo. First of all, I work on the Enterprise Decision Support Services team. I think you'll be hearing more from Julie, our team lead, up in a little while. So I intend to talk a little bit about Denodo, what it is, talk a little bit about data virtualization, and then give an example how you could use Denodo even if you're not necessarily consuming data for reports. You can even use it to make a simple API pretty easily. Talk about how it integrates with our existing security, and some more examples on how it's being used now and how we're going to plan to use it soon in the future. So first of all, data virtualization. Data virtualization is not the same as data warehousing. Data warehousing is where you take a lot of data sources and you scrub them and you actually store them on premises. And data virtualization is not that. It's more like you have a multitude of different data sources. They could be out in the cloud. It could be spreadsheets. It could even be our data warehouse that you're virtualizing. And you can combine them, put them together, and then publish them out really easily in a variety of formats like web, HTTP. You could even integrate with things like FTP or file shares. Really whatever you need, however you need to consume the data. Data virtualization is supposed to make it easy to kind of abstract that layer of wherever that information is hiding and however you need to get it. So why we got this Denodo software is because we needed more agility with the DSI project. It takes a while to take different data sources and combine them in a normalized form and put them in a data warehouse, and to have all of the structures out there to support them. And it's a little faster to use data virtualization because at each different level, as you'll see in some of my later examples, you can kind of change the scheme of your data, and you can filter it as needed on the fly. But we got it for DSI projects, and we had some good examples of what those were earlier. But in the long term, hopefully it'll help promote reusability so we can really get to this state where all of those hidden data sources that we have right now, different departmental data sources or, library information records, as well as the data warehouse is more accessible to everyone. So you can discover the information that you need wherever it might be at the university, and hopefully make it easier and more efficient to apply security. So again, we purchased it for DSI, but we found it very useful for other things, and in the future, hopefully we'll be able to do things like the 10 no regrets analysis, like collapsing sections taught by combining ad astra data with SIS data and student schedules, bringing that all together. Let's see. Now we get to the stuff that I'm actually excited about, because I'm a programmer, and I love APIs, application programmer interfaces, little widgets you can use to make sometimes a tiny RESTful call to get just the data you want for your application. You don't have to jump through a lot of hoops when you're coding. So what Denodo can do is it can take data from almost any source and really quickly turn it into something you can consume in your application with whatever kind of query you need to make from your application. If it's RESTful, if it parses JSON or XML, and regardless of where that data comes from. It could even come from another API that has a format that you don't like. You can use Denodo to virtualize it into something you like. So here's a little walkthrough. I'm not going to do like a live demonstration or anything, but the first thing you do in Denodo, this is actually the GUI you see here, is you connect to the data source. Much like any kind of GUI that you'd have to connect to a data source, you can do like a JDBC. It also has other inbuilt drivers for things like cloud data sources like Amazon Redshift, big data sources like Hadoop, or spreadsheets, flat files. Wherever you have your information, you should be able to get to it using Denodo, usually in one, maybe 2 or 3 different configuration screens, depending on the type of data you're getting. Once you connect to your data source, you can then browse through it, find the schema you need or the tables you need, and interrogate what's inside that data source. And it has a similar kind of view across different types. Like I say, if it's big data or if it's just JDBC or spreadsheet. And once you pull it in, the Denodo GUI will let you add and join different kinds of data sources. And it doesn't matter where these came from, but you can drag and drop relationships between different keys. You can even do all sorts of application and business logic within views like that in order to do some light massaging of your data. And once that's done, you might have a new schema that you just created on the fly based on a couple of tables from different sources. And if you see in the upper right-hand corner up there, there's a little publish button. And once you click that, it asks you what resource path do you want? How do you want people to be able to access this online? And you see down in the, do a little weatherman act here, down in the lower left-hand corner, you see authentication. I probably can't read it there. It says HTTP basic with VDB. And that means whoever can access this data in Denodo can then use the RESTful API that's been created and just hit it with an HTTP call to get back the data. And you can select on the left-hand side, if you want it accessible over simple HTML, XML, JSON, even RSS feed, however you want it available. And then with the next click, you have something published. And this is a nice, simple API. This was accessed just with one query parameter, and it comes back in the JSON format because in this instance, it's just what we needed. In the example that I'm showing, it was because in my department, we were working on creating a new application to do some access control management, and we were trying to get data out of a certain reporting application. Names won't be named, but it wasn't in the right format that we wanted, and it didn't have the right query parameters that we wanted, and we were having trouble jumping through the hoops necessary to make our program call it in a way that we wanted. So instead, we went direct to the application's database, mined the data, put criteria on it, and then we have this published out in a matter of hours rather than weeks or months, because it is a pretty simple GUI to learn. So I mentioned that it had security through Active Directory. We can have just normal Active Directory groups, and they're managed internally. So we'll go through, a data manager approval process for users to be able to come in and access the data. It's not really reinventing the wheel. It's using what we already have. We can do a little reinvention of the wheel with this. We can add things like row level and column level security. That means you can have one view or one API, and depending on who's accessing it, it could look totally different. You might have an instructor that accesses it and only sees records relating to their courses, or if someone doesn't have the property security group, some columns might be obscured. So there's a couple other good examples here. We have footprints, Canvas, something with people admin data. I should have time to get to all that. So first of all, Footprints is beginning to use data to kind of structure this unstructured application data. There's Footprints, of course, is a ticketing system. And in the different, I don't understand all the internals about Footprints. I've only seen it from the Denodo perspective, but there's multiple different data sources. The data sources are portrayed up on the left-hand side of the screen, and some of the icons that look like the standard database driver. Oh, it's way too small to see, isn't it? Shoot. But there's different types of data sources. And then when you're looking at your query at the top of this tree view, some of them come from different types of data sources. It looks like there's some JDBC, and that one might be a different kind of API there. But you can structure your data if it's difficult to join. It's not that you couldn't make JDBC queries or SQL queries and then join them elsewhere, but this makes it easy to interrogate for the next person who comes along and tries to figure out where your data is coming from. Canvas right now is doing a lot of interesting things. One of the things I'm actively working on with Canvas is try to help them really leverage the row-level security so that when an instructor looks at a view and they want to look at their students' activity in their course and pull up metrics about that, that they only see their own courses. They're also right now using Amazon Redshift. So a nice thing about Denodo is it has these cloud drivers, so you can pull in data from anywhere without the same kind of hassle as installing something like a Redshift driver on your own server. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but Denodo also has a web crawler. You may have heard of web crawlers. For example, Google has the most famous web crawler. They crawl through all the web pages they can find and index them to give you nice search terms. And Denodo also has a web crawler. And what this can do is imitate the clicks as you're going through different websites, through different authentication, and it can kind of proxy where you'd usually download a file to your desktop. You can download it and cache it in Denodo, and then you can pull up the data, combine it with other data sources. So right now we're using it to get people admin data. And you can see the different kinds of clicks that you'd go through, and it uses XPath to look at the HTML, and maybe I'm getting too technical. But this is a brittle technology, just because people's websites change, and they don't usually let you know before they change their websites. So if you can use another API, it's always better too. But we do have that technology there. Like I say, if an API exists, you can use Denodo to get it and proxy into a new API. It is kind of adding in an extra level, but if you have the need to do that, you can with Denodo, especially if you need to combine it with, say, things from the data warehouse. So in this example, you can see up here it has a data route HTTP client, and it gives the HTTP path, and behind that there's configurations where you have a sign-in to access that data. You can even pass through the user who's trying to access the data into a back-end web client, or in this case, into the API. And then you access your data just the same as you would, again, with a spreadsheet or an SQL database. So all of that, I hope, didn't put you to sleep too badly. But data virtualization isn't exactly vaporware, but it does get a little amorphous because it adds a level of abstraction between whatever your data sources are and however you want to present it, and it gives you lots of choices there. Hopefully, at the end of the day, the more adopters we have, the more data there will be in Denodo, and the easier it will be for folks to discover all the data that we have at the university and share it. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.